chances of that actually happening were low, and we didn't know how hot things might get, if indeed they would at all. But as it turns out, that prediction was bang on, and it's coming true, unfortunately, right in front of our eyes. These are escalating. Today's a quick recap if you missed that video. The El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, is a term used to describe the Pacific Ocean. And at the time of recording, and temperatures usually do reach around 1 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal, shifting tropical convection currents and jet streams. This typically brings wetter winters to California and some regions in South America, and drier conditions to Australia, Indonesia, and southern Africa. In fact, one strange quirk of El Nino is it tends to support Atlantic hurricanes. What it does is increase upper level winds across the tropical Atlantic. That then creates wind shear that pulls apart tropical storm systems before they can develop into the hurricanes. But unfortunately, it's bad news elsewhere because it enhances the potential for Pacific storms. That's due to an increase in energy in the ocean, because warm surface water fuels the development of tropical storms, which turn into cyclones. And also, generally, global potentially very strong or even super event. If or indeed when that happens, it will escalate into a super El Nino, the likes of which we've only seen a few times in history, and that will supercharge global warming and extremes around the planet. NOAA's Climate Prediction Centre updates their ENSO predictions once a month, so maybe by the time you're watching this we'll have more information. We may even be in the midst of a super El Nino. But what we do know is that super El Ninos have happened before, and they will likely happen again. And whatever happens, it's going to be a wild old ride watching this one play out. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new today, please hit subscribe. Channel, then we 1 year on the road to 400 subscribers. So subscribing, helping us out is one of the best things you can do for the channel to help us keep making content like this. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Sarukian has bet $1 million on Justin Gaethje to beat Ilia Topuria. Now, this wasn't like most bets I've ever seen. Tito did one that we gave him a very hard time, but Tito had bet on somebody, and I believe it was Cyborg, I believe it was the girl fight, but either way, he bet on somebody and he bet $70,000, and as proof, after the fight, he posted a ticket of a $70,000 bet on Cyborg. The problem with that, and the reason that we teased him, is it was just the ticket. It wasn't Tito holding the ticket. So it was very clear whether it was Photoshop or this was it. And a lot of guys do this for sponsorships from some gambling company, and the whole thing is a scam, and we're supposed to fall for it. But it just seemed very real, considering it was Arman Tsarukyan. It does very real, considering it was a guy who could place $1 million bet, and he provided it. It was digital, but he provided it. I'm only sharing for you. Why? What's he know that we don't know? And Sarukian just, it was very sweet for Justin Gaethje, by the way. I mean, like, if Justin Gaethje sees this piece, there's no way he sees it and it doesn't feel good and have a warm feeling about Sarukian. Sarukian was ultimately defending Justin Gaethje. Ultimately, that's what this boils down to. And he said we count him out of all of his fights, including his last one. That's a quote. But Justin Gaethje just keeps on doing one thing over and over. Winning. And it's very interesting. It's interesting because the winner of Gaethje and Ilia is going to draw in to Arman. So Arman is saying who he thinks his opponent is going to be. Now, there's something on that. And the two guys, when they walk to the octagon, both know who's going to win. And it's not what you say. Where both guys have absolute confidence in this. These are silly things to say. You will never hear from a real athlete about confidence. Confidence comes from a coach or a guy in the room or a guy that didn't do it. He said, I wish I had more confidence. But the secret that only the athlete knows, they don't have any confidence. Confidence has got nothing to do with any of this. That's just a made-up buzzword. Both guys, when they walk to the ring, know who's going to win. Now, there are times when you get a surprise. I'll give you a great example since we're talking Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje did not believe that he was going to beat Tony Ferguson. I can tell you this 100%. 100%. Justin Gaethje did not believe he was going to beat Tony Ferguson. And Justin not only beat him, he beat him for every round, every minute, every exchange of that fight. And when that fight was over and they put the first ever belt around Justin Gaethje, his first time. Right now he's a two-time interim champion and a BMF champion. This was the first time a belt ever goes around his waist. You should have seen the look on his face of absolute relief and surprise. He was so happy. That was his happiest moment. But the reason for that is he didn't think it was coming. And there are times where you will surprise yourself. I only share that. Ilia and Justin both know who's going to win this fight. I don't know what that answer is. I don't know what they both feel. But they both have a feel. And it's not guaranteed to be themselves. Arman also has a very good idea of who's going to win that fight. Arman has a very good idea that if he is ranked number one, and he is to become the number one contender, Armin's got a very good idea of which one of those guys, right? Like if anyone can set the media and push the hype aside and be able to look at what's in front of them, yes, I would agree. It would be Gaethje and Ilya for this game. But the next best thing would be the guy that's got the winner, and that's all. And Armin is saying, the Gaethje is going to beat him. Now they asked Armin, how's he going to beat him? And he was a little lighter on details. And I some guys can wear a suit. No man can wear a suit. Ilya Topuria comes in, takes his suit off one piece at a time, takes it off, and he perfectly folds it. He perfectly folds his socks. He gets the shirt so the tongue so it's just perfectly so he can put it on after his fight. Does everything just right. He's completely like he's talking to his teammates. He's saying hello to other guys. He never wants focuses. He never wants to get that crazy look in his eye. He never wants this one of those warm-ups where he's screaming right and he's punching things. He's calm. And Luke is thinking this guy is down. So then the fight gets closer. He not only put Max down, which is the first time Max has ever put down, he put Max out, and he came back. Now, Ilya did nothing different, but Luke's opinion of that changed instantly. And Luke went from, this guy's not a professional enough, this guy doesn't have enough experience, this guy isn't taking this serious enough. Luke went from that to all of a sudden, this guy is a problem. Because there is nobody that has ever walked in the back of a UFC 45, let alone a main event title fight that has been that calm, that has believed in himself to that degree, that was able to stay that relaxed in such a tense moment. And that's very interesting to me because I feel that Ilya is up against it, but nobody's discussing that. The odds makers don't believe it. I feel that Ilya Topuria, who was supposed to fight in January, had to miss that fight because he had these personal reasons. He had to relocate from Spain to Miami. Now you're talking about potentially a new team. You definitely got a new surrounding. And everything's different, by the way. Like if you're in Spain, there's certain foods that you're used to eating. If you come to Miami, you don't have those foods anymore. That might sound small to you, but that can kill an athlete real quick. Real quick it can. Then you got new teammates. Does that involve new coaches? He's now at the Boxer Gym, BOXR. But that's more of a facility, to my understanding. The team that is around is the same ones he had in Spain, to my understanding, but I'm not perfectly clear on that. Meanwhile, Justin Gaethje keeps reporting just feel that Ilya's up against it. And then you've got a conditioning issue, which isn't something you can change. That's not a DNA that you're born with. That goes down to how much focus and discipline that you have in this specific time frame to fill your gas tank as full as it needs to be to deal with a machine like Justin Gaethje. And being active versus being non-active. Being at your gym, eating your food, in your bed, so that you can rest and recover and get to do it all over again the next day throughout training camp is so important, and Ilya had none of those things. But I haven't heard anybody talk about it. I haven't heard anybody talk about the delay that's been almost a year. You can get out of shape in about 7 days. That might surprise you guys. You can get out of shape in about 7 days. 10 days, you can physically look like something different. He's been out of the ring for a year, 12 months. No one's talked about it. Been out of the ring so long that they had to hold an interim belt as they stood by their man who's got the undisputed belt. Nobody's talking about it. Ilya is up against it. That's cool. That's one more hurdle for Ilya to get through. That's one more piece to add to the legend of Ilya Topuria. But now he's got to go out and do it after being out for a year, changing gears, changing locations, changing his diet. And he's got to do it against Justin Gaethje. Your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. That's a hard draw. I think Arman Tsarukyan sees it that way. I think that Arman realizes that the bigger challenge in front of Ilya than the media is letting off. There's a bigger challenge in front of our undisputed champion. Who at what point does ring rust become real? A year is a meaningful amount of time. I sat for 2 and it wasn't my choice. I was on suspension from the athletic commission, but I sat for 2 years, and I will tell you, it felt like forever. I mean, it felt like a really long, I know it put 2 years to go by, but it felt like a really long time. Now, this is only half of that, but it's still a year. And why is nobody talking about that? And is that what Tsarukyan sees? Tsarukyan sees something, whether he's going to tell us or not. He doesn't owe it to us to tell us what he sees, but he sees it and he believes it. And he believes it to the extent that he put $1 million on it.
rolling for just a moment, you will want to hear this. What is unfolding right now in the north of occupied Palestine is nothing short of a physical security earthquake, a collapse of the vaunted technologically superior occupation army that has spent decades and billions of dollars building the most militarized border in the Middle East. We are talking about the Lebanon frontier, a zone so saturated with spy drones, ground-penetrating radar, remote-controlled machine guns, and layered fences that occupation officials have repeatedly claimed it is impenetrable. Well, that carefully crafted illusion, that house of cards, came crashing down in the early hours of Tuesday morning when fighters from the Lebanese resistance crossed that so-called impenetrable barrier undetected, walked right into the Margaliot settlement, and brought a state of sheer, unadulterated panic to the streets of Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem. Mountain Ridge. A number of these highly trained resistance operatives not only infiltrated occupied territory, but managed to set up an ambush, striking patrol vehicles along the so-called contact line, the very line that is supposed to represent total occupation control. The occupation force's own statement, riddled with the usual propaganda lies, tried to claim that no soldiers were injured, a desperate attempt to cover up the fact that their elite troops were caught completely by surprise. And here's the detail that tells you everything about the mindset of these resistance fighters. The one who was killed, eliminated after a firefight, was wearing Crocs. You heard that correctly. The myth of the mighty occupation army was punctured in part by a man in foam clogs, proving that this confrontation is less about high-tech gadgets and more about sheer will, courage, and the ability to outthink the most fortified military in the region. If this opening has your blood boiling, or if you appreciate journalism that cuts through the Western propaganda, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs to know the truth, and drop a comment in the comments section, even if it is just a dot or write resistance. Help me overpower the algorithm that tries to suppress these truths. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button to support honest, independent journalism. Now, let's pull back the curtain on how this actually happened, because the occupation's official explanations are falling apart as we speak. Let's sit down, get comfortable, and dissect this military masterpiece piece by piece. I promise you, by the end of this update, you will never look at the unbeatable occupation army the same way again. To understand how this was pulled off, you have to understand the chessboard. The settlement of Margaliot is not some random village. Its original Arabic name is Hunan, a historically strategic point in the Upper Galilee, sitting on the Naphtali Mountains at a specific elevation that makes it down at the town ridge. Watch matter. Think of a spine. Yes, but it also offers deep fissures, wadis, dry riverbeds that fill with fog in the early mornings, and natural concealment. In the spring, the vegetation on the Lebanese side of this ridge grows thick enough to hide a battalion, let alone a squad. The occupation forces rely on sensors here. Thermal cameras that are supposed to pick up body heat, laser fences, and seismic detectors in the ground. However, those sensors have a massive blind spot. They were optimized for a war against conventional armies, not for a patient indigenous guerrilla force that knows every rock and tree. What the occupation forces missed, or perhaps ignored, is that this terrain has been a highway for resistance fighters for decades. Back in 2018, the occupation forces launched something they called Operation Northern Shield, a desperate scramble to find tunnels running under the Blue Line. They found some in Metula near Ramieh and in other sectors, but the nature of the limestone geology near the Margaliot area means that a tunnel doesn't have to be a sophisticated subway system. You don't need a massive boring machine. You need a shaft on the Lebanese side, dug by hand over months, maybe years, leading to a natural karst cave system that pops out just behind an Israeli sensor tower. Estimates indicate, the occupation military admitted in a rare moment of honesty, that the gunman, likely a member of the Ridwan force, had been hiding in the area for some time. There are strong suspicions about the presence of an entire cell operating in the area, and it is possible that he emerged from a tunnel. But I want to dig deeper. I don't think this was just a tunnel operation. The Reman Ridge allows for something else. It's terrain masking. The ridge sits at a specific angle relative to the border observation balloons that the occupation flies. When you approach from a specific azimuth, the radar shadow of the mountain hides your heat signature until you are literally on top of the fence. The resistance fighters, using drones purchased commercially, would have mapped these specific approach vectors months ago. They would have watched the rotation of the occupation patrols. They would have known that on a Tuesday morning, the troops who had been up all night in the watchtowers are exhausted, drinking coffee, looking at their phones. That is the moment of the hunter. Let's walk through the timeline as we have pieced it together from Hebrew media and resistance sources. In the early pre-dawn hours, the hour of the wolf, when human focus is at its lowest, the cell moved out. They were likely split into two elements. A diversionary element might have fired a few mortar shells or launched a small drone to pull the occupation's attention toward the direction of Menara or the Sheba Farms, the classic flood and fire tactic. And the main element, however, slipped to the dead zone. There is a gap in the sensor coverage where the fence turns at an odd angle to accommodate a massive wadi. Using blacked out night vision goggles or simply using their intimate knowledge of the footpaths, they crawled through this specific low spot. Many reports indicate that the fence near that area has been hit by anti-tank missile fire in the past weeks. It is likely that a gap was already present, a tear that the occupation's overstretched engineering corps hadn't gotten around to patching yet. The fighters simply walked through. Once inside the perimeter of the Margaliat settlement, they didn't run into the town square. That's what the occupation security expects, a mass shooting. No, these were professional military operators. They lay prone near the tree line overlooking the road that connects the settlement to the main base of the 769th Brigade. Then they waited. The first occupation patrol vehicle came rumbling down the road, lights dimmed for tactical security. The fighters waited until the lead vehicle passed a specific outcropping of rock, an ambush point designated KS, and then they struck. Rocket-propelled grenades from the high ground hit the engine block and the rear of the cab, hitting the vehicle in a kill zone. Automatic rifle fire raked the occupants as they tried to dismount. The Israeli media is reporting the activation of a procedure known as Night-Night B. This is not a routine security measure. Night-Night B is a military emergency code indicating that an enemy force has physically breached the territorial perimeter of the Green Line with hostile intent. It is the highest state of alert, usually reserved for the possibility of a total breakdown of the border. When that code went over the military radio net, you have to understand the chain reaction. Helicopter gunships were scrambled from Ramat David. The entire upper Galilee was locked down. And significantly, this is where the sheer panic is evident, the occupation deployed its most elite naval commando unit, Shayatet 13, to the infiltration area. Of course, when the military fails, the politicians in the occupation government go into full hysteria mode. And here, we have to connect the dots back to the larger chess game between Washington and Tehran. The entire world is watching the tentative ceasefire between the occupation and the Islamic Republic of Iran hold. That ceasefire was never about peace. It was a strategic repositioning. Enter the clownish figure of a former occupation prime minister, Naftali Bennett.
So how concerned are you about Israel spying on the United States and freelancing in Lebanon?
Well, look, I think obviously the Israelis and the Israelis and the United States, we have a lot of shared interests, but we also have some situations where our interests diverge. And I think what the president has been very clear here is that while Israel obviously has some objectives, and it has, the United States' main objective in Iran is to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. And we've actually, thanks to what's happened over the last few months, but really over the last year and a half, we've created the space necessary where the president believes, and I think that he's right, that we can get the long-term settlement to Iran's nuclear deal. Now, Israel may like that, they may not like that, but fundamentally, we think this is in the best interest of the United States of America, so we're going to keep on pursuing it because that's what the President of the United States was elected to do. That's what we have to do in order to properly serve the American people.
You think the Iranians are trying to play us at the negotiating table?
Well, I think, Jesse, everybody's always trying to play everybody. I think the president's attitude on this is we have to verify, of course. One of the most important things to whether this ultimate settlement is a success is not what the Iranians write on the paper, but whether they actually comply with some of the requirements of the settlement that we come up to. I think it's very important. This is one of the big differences. You always hear people talk about the Obama deal and what went wrong with it. The number one thing that went wrong with the Obama deal, Jesse, is that there was not a proper inspections regime to ensure that the Iranians could never build a nuclear weapon. And that's one of the big
Diet Coke and Coke Zero, side by side. Both are sugar-free. Both have almost no calories. Both carry the Coca-Cola name. And both seem to promise the same thing, cola without sugar. So why do they both exist? If both drinks are sugar-free Coca-Cola products, why did Coca-Cola